Yay. Hello, Anthropos Festival. Good morning. I hope you had a great night yesterday. I was surely dancing until 3 a.m. yesterday, so I'm a bit tired now, but it was great. So just give me a second. I'm just going to go ahead to the theme. Yes. So we are here on Sunday to talk about decolonizing the mind and the recent protests and everything that's happening in the world. We have a few experts that I'm going to in different fields of life, and I'm going to soon explain what they are. I just want to explain that one of the speakers couldn't connect with us. We've been trying for last hour, but there's massive technical problems, and we don't know what that is. So yes, apologies for that. Akuya is not with us, but she might be on the chat and she might be typing to us. So I'll start with maybe introducing my speakers. So we have Ashwin there, who is working for THTC, the hemp trading company, and Ashwin has been very active for years in terms of cannabis policy, but also racial justice and social justice. I'll let him talk more about himself. This is a brief introduction. Then Natalie is a psychiatrist, a doctor, and yes, she's going to be here to comment about mental health aspects. And Mela here, she's a yoga teacher, wellness expert, and all the goodness that we need to feel good. That's what she does, body work and all. So maybe let's start with you guys just telling me quickly, what do you do and what's you're interested with the subject? So maybe let's start with Ashwin.
I was actually going to volunteer women first. Ladies, absolutely laid.
I was going anti-clockwise with my screen.
Oh really? Oh, I've got it. I'm right at the bottom, so I prefer my sisters to go first. Absolutely.
Okay. Which one of you ladies goes first?
I'll go, just to stop the awkwardness. So I'm Natalie. I am a mental health doctor or psychiatrist. Currently working in South East London. The area that we cover, what I cover in my job, is one of the sickest boroughs in the UK, really, for mental health. Also has a really high Black and ethnic minority cohort. So yeah, that's what I do.
Thank you. Mela?
Hello there, I'm Mela. I'm a yoga teacher, wellness coach, sensory alchemist. So part of my work is using all the senses to enhance our well-being. And lately, well, in the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of focus on Kemetic yoga and African spirituality, and bringing that a lot more into my practice and teaching.
Thank you.
And I'm Ashwin Bowler, a professionally angry man. So essentially for the last 5-6 years, I've been, I should say, a digital consultant, head of social for THTC Clothing. I still run the social presences, but I've also been kind of involved in anti-racism activism, anti-homophobia, anti-transphobia activism for as long as I can remember. Like my entry point into the whole kind of area of social activism was the Palestine Solidarity Movement. And essentially, I think every part of my life, whether it's been like working as a lowly civil servant or even a snowboard instructor, has kind of been geared towards anti-racism in some way. And essentially through THTC, which is one of the UK, which is essentially an ethical streetwear label, we're able to fund anti-racism activism and have a very large social presence through just selling T-shirts, essentially.
Well, you're selling T-shirts and also you're selling ideology in a way and lifestyle. You sell more than T-shirts and
saving the world.
Exactly. I want to add THC also helps a lot of artists, and they're just like basically lovely, and their T-shirts last forever, and socks are great too.
Come on, it's
I
not
wear them. I wear them all the time. Anyway,
you.
stop with advertising now. But when you buy it, they usually see you support good causes. So let's dig into our conversation. I'm hearing that Akuya has changed a phone now, and we might be able to get her later. But let's start discussing here. I'll invite her when we get to later questions that concern her even more. So first, guys, just wanted to check, what are your thoughts? Like, everybody's struggling recently. What is the best term to use about people? Is it people of color? Is it BIPOC, or BAME, or global majority? What, according to you? Because, for example, I met a lady who was Indian, and she said to me that people of color is offensive to her because just doesn't feel right to be person of color because we all have the color and stuff. So just want to ask you, what is the best term that we should actually use at this stage to describe this quite big group of people?
I would say that it's difficult, isn't it? Because the terms that we use, whether it's POC or BAME, they're quite reductive in their essence. So they group together lots of different people who have very different cultures. They have very different experiences of racism. Why they were originally made up, I guess, were for things like research and statistics. So they have their uses in some ways where they can show differences in white and black and people of color in things like education or, whatever. They use it for statistics. And that's probably where it was born out of. But, using it as a blanket term for people who aren't white is just, I think it's really, you're sort of dismissing everyone's individual experience. It's sort of just an umbrella term for everyone who isn't white, which, I don't think is a really forward-thinking thing.
It's creating more white supremacy in a way, because we're again seeing from the white angle, everyone who's not white.
If by definition it's, white privilege, you're privileged because, everyone else is other, whereas, white is the standard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree very much with that. And I would, again, look to emphasize the point that the Black experience, I mean, whether you can, universally even call it the Black experience, is, so different from, say, the Brown experience.
Yeah.
Like my experience growing up as a, as a brown man. And even that within my own color, I find even calling like POC, I find that, it kind of reduces, the, the Black British struggle. It reduces the Black American struggle and the, the brown, or even, every other kind of color. It, our struggles are very, very much independent.
Yeah.
And the reductiveness, again, I mean, it's essentially a tool to, for, a broad brush of governance, a broad brush of treatment for, a whole host of kind of material drivers that, that are causing what we are seeing right now and the result in what we're seeing right now. I think that there is a place in terms of statistics, in terms of kind of, general kind of analysis when we're looking at things like crime or mental health. But when we're looking at like the individual's experience, like we can't, we definitely cannot reduce like the experience to, just a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
A 4-letter acronym, sorry.
Yeah.
I heard someone said, and I thought this is really interesting, when asked about this same question, she said, I don't identify with other people on the basis that neither of us is white. Like Ashwin was saying, if you look at the racial hierarchy, if white's at the top, black is very much at the bottom. And also it's sort of this broad stroke for everyone. It doesn't make any sense. Like you said, the Black experience is completely different to the brown experience. You've got young Black unemployment at 50%. I think what illustrates it perfectly, I don't know if anyone saw this, but Matt Hancock, the health secretary, was having an interview on the news, and the newsreader asked him, how many she said, how many black people do you have in your cabinet? And he was like, well, we've got Priti Patel and we've got, his name is brown people. And she was like, no, I said black people. You can't plug them all together and think you've ticked a box. And he obviously couldn't answer anything because there are no black people in Conservative cabinet. And what he said, which I think was gold, was, well, we've got diversity of thought. Yeah, that was his answer.
And even that's not true. Even that's not true.
Also,
yes.
It also depends as well where you are. It's like I've just come back from Sierra Leone, which is where my dad's from, and I've never been before. And it was the first time that I've been called white. So I was like, what? Who's the white lady? And I was like, I don't know. And it was like, oh, they was talking about me. And I was like, and like you just said about the racial hierarchy, I'm already put up there by them, and it made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and to be given that privilege straight away just based on the shade of my skin. So it depends where you are. You might feel comfortable calling myself a person of color here, but that might not mean anything somewhere else. So it's just so all messed up, isn't it? Really? Yeah.
I mean, that speaks very much to almost you speak about the hierarchy of color and class, and again, this is something that I think we need to, especially in the Asian community, in the Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi community, that we need to seriously address in terms of our own anti-blackness, of how our anti-blackness causes how we use black people essentially to, or the measure of blackness as a measure of class, as a measure of your distance from your labor, from how much time you spend out in the fields or in the gutters cleaning. Like when we see like products like Unilever's Fair and Lovely constantly being pushed out there.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? Like
the rage.
Yeah, exactly. That it brings it like what we have to do is be really honest as to what is it about blackness, what is it about this class construct that we are looking to other. Why is it that we're looking to why is it we're looking to propagate this belief? Why is it we're looking to start a whole market on this belief? The like hiding behind whiteness is something that I think brown people do. Like when we talk about, for example, coming to the point about colonialization. In fact, no, I'm going to wait till we actually bring up the point of colonialization before
which is next.
Yeah.
I was going to mirror what you said, because these terms, it ignores the anti-blackness that exists in many other people of color. It ignores the you have to just put everyone in a BMAE category. It ignores the racism that exists in there as well. I mean, I don't have an answer. I think it's something that maybe needs working on, and we should be looking at people for their individual experiences rather than, just put them in a group of other.
Well, as soon as you put them all in a group, just by what you're saying, how many, politicians are black, in the mindset, well, we've got one. We've got an Asian.
Whatever.
Can we discuss Akia's point that she's just raised in chat?
Yes, I will also try to invite Akuya again in a moment. But we can, yes. So Akuya says all these terms only mean something because it's another point to inequality. I think it works to keep the conversation far from the seat of the problem. It's a false flag.
Yeah.
Anyone want to comment?
I would say that is most definitely that's most definitely a truth. Again, I mentioned it earlier, race in this context is a class construct. The problem is inequality. The problem is wealth inequality, inequality of access to education, inequality of access to, social outcomes. There's real differences that are being kind of imposed upon the working class of Britain, and we see that. Like yesterday, you look at the difference in response of white supremacist rage on the streets.
Even the language they used.
Yeah, because I mean, this is the thing. Like the black struggle has taught itself the language in order to articulate its own oppression, whereas these white guys are again from very similar, economic groupings, but they don't have the language to express themselves. They're speaking in sound bites from Paul Golding and Tommy Robinson, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express.
Yeah.
Whereas, you look at the BLM movement and they're using a whole different lexicon. We're creating, additional words and pieces of literature and art to explain that. Whereas, it's, I don't know what is, see, this is the thing. And again, this is why, even when like I have, my own mother that sometimes calls me a coconut, that I can't truly understand that. I can empathize with the white condition, but I can't understand it, so yeah, and I don't know why. And even now, when we start to think about decolonialization, I'm still wondering whether I'm still making it more excuses for white people's behavior than I am, looking to actually, bridge a gap. I feel that even then, because my background was I was brought up in a exclusively white neighborhood. I was pretty much the only brown kid in town, like at Coton Green Primary, until I think about year 5 or year 6. And the only other kid, Asian kid, was the guy from the family whose kid owned a corner shop. Like that was everybody else's experience of that. So, yeah.
I'm just conscious of the time, so I want to steer the discussion further now. So let's talk about decolonization, and for now, actually, let's talk about colonization. So we have a situation where Europeans go out there and they just basically invade other lands and enslave people and then strip of their heritage, religions, base everything. So we have this situation, and then we have white supremacy dominating the world. So we have representation in media, massive stereotypes, recruitment issues, police, massive issues with police and arrests and stops and searches as well. So we live in this world, and this obviously has a massive impact on mental health. So Natalie, if you can maybe comment, what is the impact of all of this white supremacy on mental health of a Black person, and especially let's think of someone who's very young, who's a teenager.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a really good question, and there's a lot of research and things going into this, and it's pretty clear that the studies consistently show there's an association between experiences of discrimination and physical and mental health concerns. The two biggest ones I say would be anxiety and depression, but there's also things like psychosis and lots of other things. What it's built from is, if you just think about it, if you're a Black man living or a Black teenager living in the UK, you are in survival mode 24/7. You've got overt racism, which is, racism you can see, racial slurs, there's counter-protesting, whatever. But then you've got the covert racism, which is the things that you don't see, the subtleties, the microaggressions, the little subtle things that you as a Black person will pick up, but other people can't see.
Can you just give a short example of what kind of microaggressions those could be?
So I've heard of people, so Black men were surveyed on this, and something they said was things like if they walked past a woman on the street, she'd clutch her handbag a bit tighter. Or if they walked past a car, they'd hear the central locking going. Little things. I get it a lot. So I grew up, I'm mixed race, Black and white. I grew up in Wales. I was the only brown person, like a 50-mile radius. I worked in hospitals here, and I got a lot of, bearing in mind I lived down the road, I got a lot of, oh, what country are you from then, doctor? Oh, you speak English well. It's just madness. And they're not coming from a bad place. They're not like trying to make me feel bad. They're, it's ignorance. But if you think about it, why that's there is that the world that we live in, the air that we breathe, the very fabric of our society was made for and by white people. If you don't fit that, you are an outsider. Everything is not for you. And living in that constant chronic stress, you may not feel stress, you may not have a high heart rate or be sweating or shaking, but you are having a constant chronic stress. That is what is spurring all these mental health problems. I've got some statistics here. This is specifically for psychosis. So psychosis is a mental health disorder where you basically lose touch with reality. You can hallucinate, you can have delusions, or sort of abnormal beliefs, and a disease that would have that as a symptom of something like schizophrenia, for example. And it's much higher in Black populations. And they're trying to figure out why. Because if you look at it in native Black populations, so if you go to Jamaica, the incidence isn't as high as if you're a migrant population. So if you're a Black person, say in England, it's much higher if you're a migrant. And the rates, for example, so, we're talking about grouping everyone into like a people of color. The annual prevalence of psychosis in Bangladeshi people is 6 out of 1,000. For Indian, it's 10 out of 1,000. For Black people, it's 16 out of 1,000. We can't group these people together that have a different experience. The reasons why they think this might be happening, why this stress is causing these mental health problems, are things like it's called social stress in the migrant condition, which is what I was talking about, just basically being constantly stressed because you don't belong. You have discriminating life events. For example, you lose your job, or you're not hired, or you have a racist incident. This stress will mess with your chemicals in your brain. Stress will do that. We know that. But if you're subjected to it 24 hours a day, then it's no wonder that mental health is just massive. Another thing they've hypothesized is something called social defeat, where you have an outsider status, where you've just basically given up. You've succumbed to the pressure, and you're in a subordinate position. This as well, we've shown, can chronically, which means for a long time, dysregulate the chemicals in your brain, which affect mental health, like dopamine. It's basically the stress of living in a white person's world. That's it, as a bottom line, because you've got all this extra stuff that you have to deal with on top of life stress. They talk about, I guess another way you can say it is generational trauma. So, or what they call post-slavery syndrome. It was actually coined by someone called Joy Degree in 2005, but it's basically like a type of PTSD, type of post-traumatic stress, because you're living in Black skin is traumatic. If you're here, if you're not in a native Black place, living in Black skin is a traumatic experience, and something you are reminded and constantly reminded of every day of your life. And that's I think it's quite logical, really, why Black mental health problems are so much worse than any other race at least in the UK and the US anyway.
Thanks, Natalie. I can imagine how living in constant stress affects you. Maybe Ashwin wants to add something about this. Did you? Because your hand was up.
I mean, it's really, there's a couple of things that I wanted to pick up on the psychosis thing that, again, as somebody who works with cannabis activists, has been part of the cannabis scene for a number of years. Psychosis is always one of those things that people talk about, and they say, oh yeah, the higher usages of cannabis, results in psychosis. But there are material drivers for that substance abuse. It's again, I think, Natalie, I don't know if you've worked directly with substance abuse. Dependent. Sorry, my words. Substance dependent people.
Yeah, that's my whole bag.
Yeah. There are some real drivers out there: depression, the lack of the lack of economic mobility, and a real need to completely dissociate from the reality that you exist within. And when we talk about,
I just want to just chip in there, because what a lot of my patients say is they actually smoke weed to help with the symptoms of, so basically we're looking at it the wrong way. They usually smoke weed to cope with their symptoms or cope with their lives. It's not the other way around, and lots of them say that.
This is the thing, I'm a 37-year-old man who's still, fairly dependent on cannabis. And the more that I've looked at kind of adult dependence on drug addiction, again, there's a path that clearly shows there is a lot of stuff that happens in your childhood that then translates into your adult life. So my childhood, like stuff that I've only found out within the last 10 years, when I first went to my primary school in Tamworth, they told my parents, don't speak to your son in your mother tongue because it will essentially disrupt his learning of English. Throughout my, I'd say throughout my primary education, throughout that primary life, like being Indian was constantly something that was othered. Like, for example, every single time that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came on TV, everyone goes, "Oh, you're Indian, you eat monkey brains." It's a bullshit little thing. As adults, that's banter. It's just pure banter. As a kid, when you're the only one, when you're the only one on your playground, everyone's saying that. When you go to your teacher or your the dinner lady or whoever and say this, and they say, and this was what was said to me time and time again as a kid, and this was during the 80s, go and play on the other side of the playground.
Oh, come on.
Go and play on the other side of the playground. Like, my problems with racism growing up within that age, that's what, 6 to 11. That was always
developmentally, those are really important years. FYI.
Yeah. You were constantly being like told that, like, this is second class. All of your Indian stuff, like even down to like little things. Then when you talk about the microaggressions, when you're in class and they're saying, "Oh, what are good types? What are healthy types of food, not unhealthy types of food?" And in the unhealthy type goes Chinese food, Indian food, Jamaican food, and on the right side you have vegetables, rice, and it's like, wait, we have all of those things. What are you talking about? Like, this is, the microaggressions, having people touch your hair, like those are the very visible ones. What about the other ones? Like for the first 10 years of my life, I had a kind of a light yellowy, reddish pencil color called Flesh. It was a pinky coloured pencil.
Don't get me started on nude and flesh colour.
You know what I mean?
Okay, don't.
The makeup and tights.
And the plasters.
Outrageous.
The company Band-Aid, who makes plasters in America, they've literally, like this week, been like, "Oh, we're going to make all different."
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 2020. We've been here this whole freaking time. Anyway, I'll get out of it. I'm not going to get out of it.
I think also, like, putting all the others in one package is something that also happens from when you're a kid. I mean, I got called all sorts of packy, and
me too.
How do you educate children? Because that's what I felt like at the time. I was like, do I have to educate you where I'm from, or what? It's like I'm offended, but I feel like I need to educate you. So this is something that you kind of, as a person, a brown-skinned person, black-skinned person, you're faced with like that all your life, like educate.
No, it gets really exhausting.
Like, well, actually, you'll find that
it's exhausting.
Yeah, and we're still educating people now.
Yes.
It's like when are other people going to educate people on race? That's which is happening now. This is something that seems to be happening now, which I'm really grateful for. Thank you,
Yeah.
who are actually doing that now. Really appreciate it, because I've been doing it for a long time. So
it's a bit too late, guys, but it's okay. We'll just accept. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention something about the feeling of belonging and stress. And I work in yoga and well-being, and that's one place where you can de-stress and feel good. And these spaces are not welcome for a lot of Black people. And there's so many reasons why that's the case. People's experiences, people being othered in those spaces. And this is something that I'm doing. People are asking me, a lot of yoga studios are now saying, hey, Mel, why have we got no, why have we got no this and that? I'm like, you're only wondering that now. And I think it's a very deep issue there. I think the avoidance of Black spirituality and African spirituality, which is just not talked about at all, even though there's so many writings about it. I've been in conversations with people talking about decolonizing yoga and the appropriation of yoga, and African spirituality and African yoga is never, ever mentioned by people who are even putting on these conversations. And I think that in itself, if African people and people from the African diaspora especially are aware of, like, this belongs to you too, you know, this is part of you have a right to that, you know. And I think a lot of people don't feel like it's their right, and they don't feel they belong. And this is something that has massively got to change. I think to get different people of different skin tones coming into these spaces, then there's got to be more conversation about African spirituality and where yoga actually came from, you know. And I think that would open up more conversation and a feeling of belonging, because it belongs to everyone, it belongs to them too. So I think that is something that hopefully more conversation will help.
There's something that on that point about the space, about finding space, about holding space, that I'd love to kind of pick up on. Like, I remember, to bring it back to psychedelics, I remember when I went for my psilocybin assisted therapy, and like during that I dealt with a lot of issues. But when I came back, one of the things was that, like, I remember, like, Psychedelic Society Netherlands, who had led the session, they talked about lots of different individual kind of components for living a healthy life: good community, good sense of work, good health, all of these little kind of bits that kind of add up to this, to a better sense of, you know, internal well-being. And one of them is, like, you know, a strong community and a strong space. And the problem is that, you know, regardless of whether we have, you know, a positive, constructive psychedelic experience, we as, you know, as brown people, as Black people, as Black men, as Black women, are still essentially coming back into an environment that for the most part is inherently abusive, like this system of capitalism, this system of exploitation. Like, one of the problems, I think, and this is again with some yoga practices, is that some of them, like, are commercially orientated. They're orientated towards making money, as opposed to delivering what yogasana is supposed to do, which is, you know, the kind of the fulfillment of the self in almost, like, physically and emotionally, you know, providing those tools. So, like, it's almost like, you know, when you clean the goldfish bowl, you take the goldfish out, you give it some, you know, medicine, whatever, but you're putting it back into the dirty water. So until, like, we're able to, like, you know, decolonize the spaces which we're coming back to, the psychedelic experience can never be truly healing for us.
Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
I think this is a very good moment to ask Akuya to join us. So, Natalie, I'm going to remove you off the screen for a bit because I can only have 3 speakers with me at a time. But please don't go anywhere. Stay in the audience, and I'll bring you back very soon when I need you again. Okay. So, see you soon.
Bye.
Okay, let's check if we can get Akuya again. Might not work. Akuya, we're trying to get you on screen. Please accept. I'm not sure if we connect. If we can't get Akuya on the screen, then we will ask Natalie back and we'll continue. In the meantime, basically, I wanted to talk about decolonization of the mind. And while Akuya is getting connected, do any of you have any thoughts about decolonizing the mind and how we can do it and what it actually means? Even for you, doesn't have to be like, scientific term.
I think, changing the stories a little bit, that's a good start. Educating people and telling the stories of what people, because some people are aware of where we've come from, and that has to go way back. So, like I said before, talking about African spirituality, and people need to feel like they come from something. There's something bigger than them. And if you don't know what that is, then how can you grow? How can you heal? So I think definitely telling the stories.
Yeah.
I would say, like, for myself, that one of the more helpful things has been essentially approaching everything through the lens of Marxist analysis. So using that system of kind of historical analysis to really identify what are the systems of oppression. And when you use that and you turn that lens back in on yourself, I saw a really interesting, a really good meme. Is a photo of somebody at a BLM protest in America. Is an older white gentleman wearing some awesome clothes, and he had a sign and he said, "Treat racism like COVID. Assume that you have it, and to treat it, listen to the experts, have an open heart." And there was some other stuff that was there, but I think the whole kind of assume that there is some kind of prejudice within you. And when you look and try to essentially analyze what drove that prejudice within you, like, for example, why don't I have like more than like 3 black friends, for example? Why is my accent the way it is? Like, why for the majority of my life did I physically distance myself from who I saw as kind of low-born Asian people, the guys who talk a little bit like this, a little bit more street. Why did exactly that? Why was I scared of these people? Why did I separate myself from them? And again, it comes down to, like, I used to call people chavs. That's classism. Like, those are things that each and every one of us can look at. Those are all expressions of colonialism. And I think in terms of decolonizing ourselves, we have to completely tear all these prejudices apart. Even my prejudices against, these, horrifically awful racists who paraded through London yesterday. Like, what is driving them? What is the material force that's driving them? We have that's what we need to question.
I think it's important, just what you said as well, is recognizing that we've all got it. We've all got different measures of it in us. Like, I was explaining it to my mum. My mum's white, and trying to explain. I know it's hard to look at, recognize it in yourself. It's a really difficult thing to admit. Nobody wants to admit that they're racist. No, okay, some people do, but most people don't want to admit that they're racist. And I as well, first time I went to Africa, and I remember being on this train surrounded by these big black African men, and I was scared. And I was like, why am I scared? I've traveled the world. I've been to other places more dangerous than this. Why am I scared of being on a train full of these black men? That is something that I have been conditioned, and I don't like that. And I recognized that, and I was like, I need to do some work, It's like, just unpick, where does that come from, and start to look for the signs. And so, yeah, we've all got it. We've all got this pandemic, and
yeah. There's no herd immunity from racism either.
Yeah.
No vaccine yet. Yes, do you guys I don't know if you've seen, about 2 or 3 years ago on BBC, they made a beautiful little documentary where white reporter girl goes to some kind of facility to test her racism, and she's really not a racist. She's really like totally cool person. And they do this testing where they show faces of different people and they measure her brain activity. And they noticed, and she was like shocked seeing the results, every time black or brown person was on screen, that racist part of brain that's responsible for racist reactions was firing off. And then very quickly, like just a second later, the other part of the brain kicked in, which said, no, this is all conditioning. Don't believe this story. So still within her brain, there was this internal fight of the racial conditioning. And it's like, no, it's fine. She had to convince herself. And it takes a split of a second, but it happens in every person's brain. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, so I have a little YouTube channel called Psychedelics, but we actually talked about this exact thing. So it was on microaggressions and how lots of these things are unconscious, which means you're not really aware of them. And it's because it's born out of what you've been exposed to and your experiences. So if you were told this as a child, then you're more likely to think it. So they're automatic, unconscious associations that you make. And everybody has them, and these don't make you bad people. What it is the part of our brains, the frontal lobe, is the more advanced part of our brains, and that's what we use to sort of counteract those things. So yes, you will have automatic, stereotypical thoughts. Lots of people do. But then it's like you said, it's that split second, that moment where you pause and you rewire it, and then you act on it. So everybody has them. So for example, if I hear a man talking and a woman talking, I'm more likely to think the man is more credible. We live in a patriarchy. That's happened. That makes me really angry because that's not who I am. But it's an automatic thought that you have that you can't stop. But then my frontal lobe comes in and goes, hang on a minute, that's not right. Maybe you should, and then, so it's that thing that everybody has the ability to reprogram, rewire your brain. So you were saying, Mela, about these things being uncomfortable. I always say, if things feel uncomfortable, you're in the right place. If it feels uncomfortable, then poke it more, because that's where you need to do your work. And what you do, you educate yourself, you catch yourself, you watch what you're doing, you listen to your assumptions, and then it'll come in time. But it's everybody does them.
Yeah.
It's how our brains work. It's more efficient to make a quick assumption than it is to, it's the way our brains have developed.
So from your clinical psychiatrist background, you'd say that racism kind of exists somewhere within that fight, flight, or freeze kind of autonomic.
So any automatic assumptions and stereotypes you make is an automatic, unconscious thing you have developed by your experiences. So because we live in a white world and we live in a patriarchy, you will have these assumptions because of where you've grown up. Doesn't make you a bad person. What you choose to do with them and how you rewire and how you act, that's the bit that defines who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It's just like, so take, for example, like to actually address those problems, you need to make a conscious choice to want to do that.
Yes.
Like anyone who goes to, therapy, Alcoholics Anonymous or, for CBT, makes that decision. I don't want to be sad anymore. I don't want to be addicted anymore. At what point for example, with a racist, if you're even like suggesting the idea of, using psychedelics as, some kind of, treatment pathway, Jesus, how do you then help somebody else make a choice to become less racist? How does that, how does that happen? How do you say, oh mate, you're racist, go get some CBT?
some anti-racist CBT.
I don't know, like something.
I think the thing is with all these things, you've got to be motivated. You can take a horse to water. You've got to be motivated. You've got to have patience. You've got to have the time. You can't make everybody. You can't get everyone to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to know. This is too uncomfortable. This makes me feel bad. I don't want to know. And you can't, with any sort of psychology, they've got to be motivated. When we ask people about getting treatment for therapy, we check whether they're psychologically minded, which means whether they actually believe this will do something, whether they think that this is possible, whether they're motivated to do it. Because if you don't have that, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, I guess if it's not going to benefit them directly, then what is the motivation as well?
Yeah, you've got to have motivation.
But I suppose this is what Akuya talks about. I'm really sorry she cannot join us, but she talks about mental health problems of the white community as well, in connection with racism, and how it messes us up as well. So maybe this is the direct benefit actually for white community. You will benefit because you will feel better. You will not feel anxious when you walk down the street and see black men, Yeah. But for example, to be honest with you, I grew up in Poland, so I'm Eastern European. I had my part of prejudice in this country as well, especially working, earning less than everyone else was standard. It was not a big scale, but still affected me. But what I wanted to say, when I was a kid, I actually glorified black skin because I thought that black people are so awesome because they make this music and they dance better than anyone. And I really, as a child, wanted to be black. I remember my friend had a black Barbie. Man, I was so jealous. I was like, every time we played, I said, can I play with your Barbie, please? Can I play with your Barbie today? And only then I grow up and this conditioning starts, the stories about black people being aggressive and that, and all this conditioning starts. And then I remember when I came to London, I was 19 and I was in Hackney and I went into the bus and I was the only white person in the bus. God, I felt so uncomfortable and I didn't have races, but I just felt, oh my God, it was a big thing. And it took me years to undo this.
You felt like a minority.
Yes. And I felt threatened also because suddenly all those people that I heard all those bad things about are all in the bus. Oh my God, But 16 years later, definitely that doesn't happen. I live in Sydenham, which is very little white people live here. And I love this neighborhood. I feel very safe on the street. But 16 years of work.
Yes, it's not a quick fix.
It's not a quick fix at all, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I want to bring something that Akuya was just saying here, because she cannot join us. I'll just read it out. She says here to us that, okay, we need to know how this race and class-based system was created. Little race bombs were left in the psychic of everyone. This is what I mean. Yeah. It's only when we know how it was created can we challenge it on the inside of us. Yeah. So understanding the system helps to dismantle the system. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to do your research. You got to do your work.
Do the work. Find out why it's there, why it exists, why did race exist in the first place? Where did it come from? There we go.
Exactly. All the conditioning, all the blackface stories and all those things. Oh God, yes, a lot of conditioning. So Akuya is posting here this is where psychedelics can work to challenge how we're all being conditioned, which is true, but only in a right framework. Yeah. And then she says, but even this is only a plaster. Our present world order has to no longer be based on the almost free extraction of black and brown resources. Any comments on that?
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, we're looking at essentially the hierarchy of capitalism, and I've resisted, although I've not resisted very much, the urge to kind of go down my Marxist, pseudo-Marxist kind of analysis of psychedelics' role in being able to challenge those structures. Again, this is something I do want to talk, I think, a little bit later on. But essentially looking at this like examining the hierarchy and examining kind of authoritarian structures as to, you know, why they're there in the first place. Because, as you know, the very shape of hierarchy is something that we're faced with like every day. Like, okay, you go to school, there's the headmaster, he's the guy at the top. Everything else is dictated from him, like where you learn, like how you learn, the manner in which you learn, and everything. You go to a place of work, and you know the boss is the guy that takes, you know, that makes, you know, 50% extra of the profit of the value that you put in, etc., etc. So we have this hierarchy, like kind of drilled into us, day after day. And then when it comes to society, when it comes to trying to prioritize, you know, resources, like how then do you decide, okay, who's actually going to get the lion's share of stuff that we're producing here? Who actually deserves more of the fruits of labor? And when we look at things like, you know, surplus value theory or wage theft theory, when we look at kind of how essentially the majority of, you know, any kind of laborer, any kind of workers kind of daily produced value is then kind of taken, and you have a markup, you have a profit that isn't then fairly translated back to the worker. You see this hierarchy again being strengthened, you know, in the world around us. Like how psychedelics, you know, I feel should be kind of deployed is like looking at ways of challenging that pre-programmed authority within us. Like let's talking to Akuya's point, you know, challenging that division within ourselves. It does come first, but I also feel that there is like a place in the material world to be challenging that hierarchy through more socialized workplaces, through worker-owned cooperatives, through you know, decentralized government, through, you know, a demilitarized police for a start. Yeah, sorry, that's as far as I'll go with that. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
Never.
Maybe it's a good moment to quickly again chip in with what Akuya said. I'm reading this out because people on the Anthropos stream, they cannot see our chat.
Oh, okay.
And
we go before. Hang on.
No worries. I actually want to say also to the Anthropos stream, like we're going to be off from here in 5 minutes, but if you want to keep following us, we're going to stay in Crowdcast for another hour. So there should be a link in the chat, and maybe moderators could send the link, please, Kubo or Simon. And what I wanted to say, guys, we're going to be back on the stream at 2 p.m. With talking about mental health and psychedelics. So it was lovely to be part of the Anthropos stream. We love Anthropos, and hopefully next year I'm going to convince all those people on screen to come to the festival with us, and you can meet them face to face. So just guys, if you want to like say bye to the Anthropos people, and we keep talking here.
Bye.
Love you.
We love you.
Bye.
Bye. Well, they can still see us for 5 minutes, but just in case we go into like deep conversation, we don't want to be breaking.
Yeah.
So. Right, maybe it's also a good moment to write more of Akuya's things. But the first step is metaphysical and spiritual. The division in our society is a reflection of our internal division. The first place to start is inside.
Oh, totally. Yes, Akuya. Woo!
Yes. Big up Akuya. She must say, she's so wise, this woman. I love her. The hidden truth is the system is ending. We as a planet are ascending. The pendulum that is now so left brain is slowly swinging back to the right. The feminine and things are happening too. Individuals and on planetary level. This doesn't mean that we need to stop working on the outside.
Of course.
This is
yes,
inside and outside. But we must stay whole. Oh, Akuya, we love you. Yeah. Very wise words. So, shall we touch a bit more about psychedelics and how they can help us and what we need? So, any thoughts? What is still needed? What is the potential, but also what we need to put in place for it to work?
I think Oh, go on.
No, go on.
No, after you, darling.
I was going to say there's an awful lot of stigma, isn't it, attached to psychedelics, and a lot of fear attached to them as well. I guess in all communities, not just in the Black and brown communities, but I do feel like certain drugs have obviously got an attachment to certain types of people.
Yeah.
And psychedelics still seems to very much sit within the white privileged kind of society. Yeah. So I mean, I've taken psychedelics half my life, and and within lots of different groups of people. So I feel really fortunate that they've been part of my life. I recognise also my I'm brown skinned, I'm not black, and I'm much more closer to white communities and lots of people. Most of my white friends are white, brought up in white neighborhoods, so I'm recognizing that as well. But yeah, this just maybe, I feel like the stigma attached to psychedelics it's quite big, and there's a lot of fear attached to it. So I guess it just comes from education, doesn't it? Educating people and creating those safe spaces. And I'm still thinking about the goldfish bowl. So yeah, it's a start, isn't it? Creating some safe spaces and educating people.
Lovely analogy.
Yeah.
Goldfish bowl. I was just going to say about, we've already sort of touched on it, but the sort of way psychedelics can loosen the mind, to help ease fixed beliefs or rigid structures. The way they can loosen that, and the way it can, feeding to people feeling connected rather than separated, seeing us all as one rather than, nitpicking on individualities. Quite good at giving you a much needed perspective. You can have the experiences you can have and give you a lot of perspective about life and afterlife, and give you perspective on, what are we actually arguing about at the end of the day. And seeing us as spiritual beings and not skin color. That's my 2 cents.
I think, again, psychedelics are fantastic for being able to, challenge ourselves. But as is always the case, it's set and setting.
Of course.
Like when we talk about one of the things that I noticed, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, was the kind of the emergence on Facebook, of all places, of adverts advertising all of these retreats, ayahuasca retreats, and microdosing and all of that. And the articles started popping up in places like Wired, and and it would always be the story of this tech bro has been microdosing for 6 weeks, and he's just created this plugin for Salesforce that extracts 50% more productivity out of his sales leads, blah blah this, blah blah that. And it's like, what is it that you're then challenging in that context? What is it internally that you're challenging? You're challenging your inner creativity towards a need to create more money. Yeah, it's a very kind of material kind of way to go. Like a lot of those experiences with psychedelics, and with especially within the healing sector, again, comes from people who identify that there is within them something that they're unhappy with, that they want to work on. Yeah. And they want to kind of look at. Whereas I think there is because psychedelics again exists on the very kind of, it still exists on the very fringes of humanity. To talk to your point about Melanie's point, why it's only white middle class people that seem to be dominating this space currently. we look at drug sentencing. We look at the incredibly disproportionate kind of arrests and sentencing of young black men, of young brown men in America, of Hispanic people. The war on drugs was something that was set up to be a racist endeavor, a way to criminalize blackness, a way to criminalize our cultures, a way to criminalize also most importantly, working class black people.
They actually admitted that, like, that's like well documented.
Yeah.
It's quite good to talk about. It's out there.
Like they were like, yeah, we did that.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, and one of the problems I found again is bringing like black people into this space, because within those communities, like especially like, I mean, these are the things, black communities that I know of South London, they're very religious, they're very compact, they're very tight.
Yeah.
The minute you start talking to them about things like, oh, psychedelic therapy, taking cannabis to like. Another thing that's a problem here as well is in order to kind of break into these communities, like you have to like reduce the shame associated with cannabis, with psychedelics, with everything. And like for example, there's another group that I'm involved with. And this is something that everybody on this stream should be aware of. In the UK, there is a Facebook group and an activist group, Court Support. What Court Support? It writes messages to, first of all, turns up at court to support people who have been arrested on a cannabis crime and whatnot. Writes messages and letters while they're in prison, and just generally is there to provide support. And this organisation has been kind of around for officially as a thing for a few months, but it's still very volunteer-led based. When we start looking at like where that came from, that came out of the cannabis club scene, and it came out of people knowing each other. And again, like these are spaces that are mostly dominated by white people, and that's not like a conscious thing. That's something like on our side as well. Like there is this shame, because to be associated with drugs is to be is to be bad. Like substance dependence is like a cardinal sin as opposed to a health problem. Yeah. There is some work that needs to be done on our side, but like this method of inclusion is something that we badly need. With Court Support, I've suggested we do outreach to kind of black community members to let them know that, oh, if there's a young black person who is being sent down for cannabis crimes, they need people to show up, because perhaps his own family isn't like confident enough or happy enough to tell anyone that they're suffering. Like, this is something that needs to this is something that's there for them. Yeah. There is some responsibility, I think, in our sense to try and start breaking down, going back to our communities, going back to our Indian communities, going back to our black communities, and mixed race communities, whichever, and showing that the use of drugs isn't something that is done by low-born people. It's not something that is to be scared of. This is, these are tools that can be used for liberation, or they can be used to, again, enslave us.
Have you seen? I'm just saying. Have you seen what Akua's written? She's written. We need psychedelic workshops for black and brown people for the release of trauma and strengthen resolve to not be triggered. The system thrives on a diet of re-triggering. Oh, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. And also, just to touch on the black communities as well, particularly the African communities who are super religious. Mm-hmm. And as much as people can have their own religion and faith, and I'm open to that. But the religion that they're practicing is a new form of religion, which is brought by white people, which instilled in them to totally remove all their African traditions, which would have been using natural herbs and as part of their practice, which has then been called, well, it's a witch doctor and it's black magic and it's bad, and it's given all these terms, which then makes it something which is like, we don't do that. That's like primitive and
that's bad.
That's yeah. So any association with anything which is spiritual, herbal, anything that's going to take you out of your natural state of being is bad, and that is a huge part of colonialism as well. Is the religious practice that so many over in Africa it's unbelievable, and
they got missionary to death, didn't they?
Yeah, totally. So there are secret societies still in Sierra Leone who do practice. I don't know what they practice because it's secret, but they're up to something. Because they still do stuff. It's like, what are they up to? Because I'm taking all psychedelics.
It's really sorry. I'm taking your job, Anya, but I'm reading what
I love it. Go for it. Like you guys talk about.
She said, we need psychedelic decolonization workshops aimed at giving white populations language and the ability to say, not in my name, to the system. The system hides behind white people, and it's up to them to reject it wholly. The elites are a tiny group of people hiding behind a wall of white people. It's up to white people to expose the system. And that actually reminds me of something I read the other day, and it kind of blew my mind. And I shared it a lot on my social media, but it said, in terms of white supremacy, living in a white world, it says, white supremacy will always exist until white people see it as a white issue that they need to solve rather than a black issue that they need to empathize with.
That's a good one.
This is bringing me to a really important subject I want to talk about.
Go.
Spiritual bypassing of racial issues. So I've been looking at internet last few days and Facebook, and I see, so I'll say like general opinions that are on the internet, and then I want your comments. Nothing I say now is what I think, just saying. I don't agree with those things.
No, it's okay.
So there is stuff like saying, oh, slavery should all be left in the past. People should forget about it and transcend. We should all unite. We should all be one. We should not have the victimhood mode going on. We should all just raise up in unity and forget about the racial issues. This is like basically what is being said in spiritual / psychedelic white mostly population. And also there are calls for Black people to come and explain yourself to us now. Come on this group on social media and tell me why racism is an important issue. What are your thoughts when you see this?
Fuck off.
Beep. We'll beep it out. Children are not watching anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean,
why the Black word is so triggering for people. It's like, fuck me, we're triggered all the time. Why is it such a it's like, are we not allowed to be upset? It's like anything else. I was going to put on my placard yesterday about something about save the dolphins just for jokes, because it's like, that's okay, isn't it? If I say, save the dolphins, nobody's going to be like, oh, well, what about like orangutans? Like,
I had this conversation like,
why are we not allowed to just do it? Just this once, like without anyone going, okay, cool. Or just don't say anything, like keep your mouth shut, let them have their moment. So it's incredible. It's been, we've all probably experienced it, this kind of like minefield, like what is it? I mean, we're only asking to matter for a start. That's a bare minimum.
They better count themselves lucky we're not looking for revenge.
Yeah, or equal.
We're just looking for equality. We're not looking for we want revenge. Shit, anyway. I'm getting executed. Right, what I would say to that, deep breath, don't swear. So, yes, I would say the ultimate goal would be to transcend this and be loving and all one. And that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. This is all goal of all of us. Yes, we want that.
I'm not denying that, but I think if you say that in the current climate, then you are an example of white privilege. Black people do not have that choice. We don't have the choice to choose whether we acknowledge it or not because it's in our DNA. We have no choice to accept or not accept racism because we are experiencing it. You have the choice. If you have a choice whether you want to accept racism or not, then you're in a privileged position. It's that choice is not afforded to Black people. So that's one thing. Secondly, if you're thinking, especially in this current climate, so maybe in the year 3000 we can all transcend, but right now you cannot, it's completely unhelpful, and especially from like a psychiatry point of view, it is not helpful to deny someone's trauma or belittle it or tell them it doesn't matter and keep it in the past. That is where mental health issues breed. You have to acknowledge these things. We have to have these uncomfortable conversations. And I think quite a lot of these responses are coming from, it's shame. So lots of things we do and what we say are based in shame. So if someone says to you, if you're saying Black Lives Matter, and they say all lives matter, and then you say, oh, you see the Black Lives Matter program, oh yeah, but they hit a horse, and that little, that is coming because it is uncomfortable to them. They feel shame, and what they do, they want to get rid of that shame, so they give you a counter argument. Unfortunately, like I said, Black people don't have that option. We can't deflect things because they're actually happening to us. Those statements alone are coming from a place of white privilege, and you have to see that. If you can choose not to accept this, or tell people to get over it, then it means you're not in it. You need to listen to the people who are closest to the pain. Those are the people you listen to. And I just get so frustrated with these things because they dress it up as something positive. All lives matter, but no, it's not positive because you cannot deny these things. And we've been denied. White people have. Talking about race with my white friends is uncomfortable. I can feel the awkwardness, but no, too long. I've had enough. People are dying. You need to be uncomfortable. You need to face it. You need to take that shame, accept it, and then we can move on. But until then, if people are dying now, is it really the time to transcend and pretend it's not happening? No.
Quickly, what Akuya says, spiritual bypassing is normal because the white populations have not had to deal with their history of genocide and theft for 500 years.
Exactly. They don't know what it feels like.
White populations have never been held accountable for stealing the Americas, Australia, and South Africa. But we know we all need to do the work. White populations need to acknowledge it's damaging them and us, but it's damaging them more. It releases more genocide. So yeah.
One thing I just wanted to mention coming on from that, I think Matteo has raised a point. My point of view is that a process of integration, I assume, is needed, and that will lead us to unity. Integration as a concept is a funny one, because integration, like in the context that it's mostly used, it's used to say to a group of people, say first generation immigrants, you need to integrate. That means you need to adapt yourself,
you need to change
all of your things to what we do, as opposed to the rest of society changing just a little to just, so we can make that happen. That actual kind of integration is a two-way street. It's absolutely a two-way street, and it is it's a conversation. I hate using that word. It's a conversation, but it is, because it's an active process. People are looking, and the problem is that when the identity of say, one of those guys, one of the white supremacists who marched yesterday, their lives are, just the same as working class black people. Their lives are struggle. They don't want to have to deal with more shit, the same way that we don't want to have to explain racism ever again. It's like a never-ending set of rules for them to sit on top of the oppression that they already experience. There are some real material drivers here that I still feel that we need to address. Like, wealth inequality is the biggest thing here. Akir said it again, Bill Gates. Oh yeah, he may be doing some cool stuff, but the fact he's a billionaire. The existence of billionaires drives wealth equality. It drives these massive wedges. Even the aspiration to be a millionaire, to be a billionaire, to concentrate wealth, to concentrate your social power, That is deeply, deeply damaging. Where does that come from? Like, where does that come from? That's what we need to fix. Like, people taking psychedelics to, realize their higher self so they can get a promotion at work, or buy that house that they always wanted, or just actualize that fancy car or whatever. Like, that draws us more and more into materialism. And it's ironic because the response of, most of these folks, that person I had that argument with on your Facebook page, he was talking about the black people just need to get over slavery. They just need to get over it. It shows like a complete disconnection from the materiality of life. Yeah. Like, another good way of explaining it is that most people could delete their Facebook profile and never have to think about racism ever again. Like, this is, you can take psychedelics, and all of a sudden, like, depending on what your intention was going into that trip, what your kind of drive was going into that trip, you can either strengthen your beliefs or you can challenge them. Like you've said, Natalie, like, when you're in that uncomfortable space, like, that happens during psychedelics, whether it's that knot in the stomach or that kind of feeling at the back of the neck. Like, when you lean into that, when you push into that and challenge that, that's cool. You get work done then. That's where growth lies. Yeah, that's growth. But a lot of people, like, when you're on, like, your back room at Fabric, you've just popped a load of Mandy, you're not there, like, thinking, oh, I'm going to challenge this. I'm going to challenge this feeling. It's just, no, Andy C's playing. I'm banging it out. Like, again, it's this set and setting. It's absolutely this set and setting.
Totally. So, I like the idea of these decolonization psychedelic workshops. They sound great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I also feel like it would be nice to have decolonization retreats.
Yes.
With psychedelics in the Netherlands, obviously, because the rest of Europe is a bit slow on changing the law. But yeah,
like, changing the environment, of course, of where you take your highs, and, like, I'm massively into nature. I mean, that's my connection to spirituality for me, is nature. And so, yeah, holding some retreats in nature, taking psychedelics.
Exactly.
That's what we need to do.
I just had this thought all this time when I was reading those comments in the psychedelic community. I was thinking it's like kind of denying people their right to be angry and their right to grieve, and
because it's uncomfortable. I don't
exactly, and it feels to me like it bring. My friend said something that really made me think. So, two things: are we going to say the same to Me Too movement and victims of sexual abuse? Should we just say, dismiss your trauma now and transcend all together now?
Yeah.
And it just feels a bit like, and then my friend Marta, who's going to be on the panel, had to said another very interesting thing. So let's say a black person accepts this beautiful offer of forgetting their victimhood. Let's say they manage to do that, and they go on the street and they meet a racist comment. And what do they do then? Do they turn around to the person and say, it's okay, dude, we're all one? No, they can't do it. Because what I'm aiming at, it's not a thing of the past. It's something that's still there. Mm-hmm. Yes?
It's not it's right there. Yes. And it's all this re-triggering.
You can't get over something that's still happening, can you?
In your present.
You can't. It's continually having to get over things. So wherever...
It's not
over it. Okay, I'll wake up the next morning. I'm over it. Oh.
It's not fair to say that. It's just really unfair.
I mean, to that exact point, did any of you guys see the video of, it was like a small group of BLM protesters in America, and there's this, I think he must have been a veteran or something, but this guy was screaming, was getting in the faces of all these BLM supporters and kind of screaming, I am fighting, like, and so even the response to him was peace, peace, no fight, peace, peace. And like, that was the only strength or de-escalation tactic or kind of, you know, integrative approach that any of those protesters had, but it did nothing to like really address, like, I don't know, the anger that this guy felt. And it also did really nothing to, you know, in that moment in time, to, you know, redress those kind of, those real societal imbalances that exist to have made that guy so angry. Like, the, you know, like telling him to de-escalate wouldn't have changed the fact that this guy was probably from a poor family and joining the military was his only way out. And it wouldn't have stopped, you know, the racist kind of training regimes that these countries have. And it wouldn't stop like US imperialism that sent him to shoot brown people. So, like, you know, the majority of America could live a semi-comfortable life. Mm-hmm. You know, this is the problem when we say that, oh, psychedelics can kind of cure everything in this respect, because they can act in the moment. But again, that moment is defined by the set and setting. So we really need to, like, there's work outside of the psychedelic scene that I think needs to work. I don't know if it, like, one of the things that I wanted to really talk about was, like, during this was about the infiltration of the psychedelic scene by kind of, you know, alt-right, far-right views and people with, you know, extreme authoritarian kind of tendencies. You know, again, that's something that happens because, you know, psychedelics exists on the very fringes, but we have some real kind of issues here, like things like, you know, Elon Musk, obviously a tripper, you know, he's a union buster, you know, that's the very top level of things. Then you have things like, you know, the Mercer family kind of giving money, donating money towards psychedelic research. The Mercer family, for those who don't know, the family behind the Cambridge, like, who were funding Cambridge Analytica. Atomwaffen, it's a white supremacist group. There was a bust with them. Like, a lot of the white supremacist groups nowadays are being caught with vast amounts of LSD on them, vast amounts of LSD. And you have, you know, again, like a real kind of love of like Jordan Peterson and the intellectual dark web amongst like a lot of these people. And it is a, whatchamacallit, you know, Jordan Peterson is the gateway drug into right-wing kind of thinking. Again, like, you know, doubling down on hierarchy, doubling down on archaic kind of beliefs, the beef diet, you know, all of these like crazy memes that it's kind of fun to kind of look at and go, oh, that's ridiculous, that's funny. But, you know, it lays the groundwork for some really worrying stuff, like the YouTube funnel into alt-right kind of thinking, Gamergate, like misogyny, transphobia. And yeah, like psychedelics are there kind of almost strengthening this belief, as it will, because the communities that they're being practiced in, like, hold these kind of hold these ideologies and hold these thoughts up as kind of sacrosanct. So those aren't being challenged, they're instead being strengthened.
Yeah, psychedelics being non-specific amplifiers. What's in you, it will be brought to the surface. So definitely, I don't believe they can change people. They can help, they can initiate, but
it can help. It definitely can't change you permanently, but it can definitely help shape your perspective. Yeah, and hopefully then you can then take that into your life and do something about it. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah. Comment from Akuya here. We as a community who want wholeness must carry on spreading the seeds. We can't stop the right wing from accessing this psychedelics.
No, absolutely. But then again, like that's the thing. You can't stop the right wing getting on the internet. You can't stop them marching in the streets. But you know, and this is where I think like my beliefs will differ greatly from many in the psychedelics scene, is that, you know, fascism, racism has to be confronted where it expresses itself, and that is in the streets. I mean, you can post, God knows, you can post all day on Facebook, you can, you know, but that is so draining because there's almost no fatigue, end to that fatigue. Yeah. And actual face-to-face confrontation, and I'm not, you know, openly advocating, you know, going around and punching people in the streets, but, you know, when by the time it gets to that point by the time the far right is marching, it is those historical moments like we see Cable Street, you know, World War II, Spanish Civil War, ground force opposition to things like Operation Gladio. You know, these are the things that have, you know, stopped or at least momentarily paused the far right until they got their act back together, or until they got their money, their funding sources sorted. So yeah, I don't like, this is the thing. I think I don't want to challenge like racists within a psychedelic space, you know, because that psychedelic space is meant for one thing. We need to be challenging them kind of outside of these spaces, and the psychedelic space needs to remain like holy for healing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I see this happening, and I kind of want to, you know, I want to address this, but not within like, definitely not within an integration circle, definitely not within a healing session. So I then start to think, where do I, as somebody who's a psychedelic advocate and an anti-racist, challenge this, you know?
Mm. So let's, we talked about this spiritual bypassing now. We pretty much covered a lot, guys, like amazing discussion. Thanks so much. I just want to also, let's say, comment on another thing that I've noticed is people saying that all those black squares, the kneeling, the protest is just making more violence, and it's like a spell, like kind of magic that will keep us all in the victimhood mode. What are your thoughts? Are the protests working? Are they productive, not productive? What is your opinion? Are you joining the protests as well? I know Mela is with her new banner.
My first protest.
Awesome.
They're working, aren't they? They're proving to be working. So, I mean, who'd have thought it? I would never have thought it a few weeks ago that they would be taking down statues of slave owners around the UK, around the world. Actually, they're coming down all over the world. So it's a start. It's something, isn't it? It's something. I mean, of course, there's going to be a backlash to that, as we see. It's happening with the EDL. So that's, you know, so protecting the monuments and then pissing all over them and being disrespectful to themselves. So it's like, oh, okay. But it's definitely working. But nothing's gonna work. Things are gonna create violence, aren't they? You know, humans. So it's not. Of course, it's going to cause some violence, but that's not a reason not to do something just because it caused some unrest, and it's not the reason to sit at home and not do anything about it. So it's definitely feels like, I feel this last few weeks there's more we've come further than we have in the last 40 years.
Yes.
To quote Lenin, there are decades when nothing happens, and then weeks where decades happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things with, you know, this historical moment is that we need to look at those moments of, you know, what I'd call historical violence, and be looking at like what materially was driving those and analyze those as much as we can, because there's a real danger here of, you know, just seeing these, you know, like the 2008 riots, right, the London uprising, and just like palming it off as you know, just simple criminality, as opposed to, you know, the explosion of real malcontent. And this is why I'm so like eager to analyze like the white riot. You know, the white riot, that what happened yesterday, that wasn't the first one. Like, happened at Cable Street, happened in Tulsa. They burned Black Wall Street. They burned an entire like rich neighborhood in America. Like, and they you know, there's also like, you know, the Move project in Philadelphia where they bombed that. They like, we need to look at this and ask, why did this happen? Like, why has this happened? What has made you like that? And we can't like sit back on lazy answers. Like, we may never, like, it's like coming back to, as you know, your psychedelic trip. You're gonna like learn more and more. The more that you revisit that, and the more that you try and break it down and analyze it and look at those actual physical drivers, that will actually start to move forward.
Yeah.
In terms of people saying, you know, is the protests of the Black Squares, are they good? Are they not good? What do they want from us? We're damned if you do, damned if you don't. We tried peaceful, you know, Kaepernick took me, that wasn't good enough. Now there's a lot of black rage. That's not good.
What they want from us is to be doing nothing.
To be completely,
Get on with it. Just get on with it. That's what they want.
You know, you can't suppress people for this long and expect nothing to happen. Like, something is going to happen. I don't, you know, it can come out in lots of different ways. It's a bit like sometimes when people have mental illness and it comes out in funny ways, like they can't walk, or, you know, their right arm's gone dead. It will find a way to come out. And I don't think it's for anyone to judge how that's happening. I think whatever happens is what's going to happen, because it's just a matter of time. It's not a case of, you know, we should be policing how we express our rage. Mm-hmm. It's when it's going to happen.
Yeah. And
I just find comments like that they're just not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I agree. Just quickly, what Akuya is saying here, I don't trust BLM, Black Lives Matter, because who created and funding it? But this is a great time to get things on the table. But people must really go more inside when it looks like we should be outside. There's a lot of forces and people with unhelpful intentions getting involved. Any comments?
I'm a bit confused with the comment of the Black Lives Matter. Is that asking because they don't know who created it, or because they know who created it and they don't trust them?
I think so. Akuya, sorry, if you're up for typing a bit more, let us know. But otherwise, we're quite baffled with what it means. Mm-hmm. George Soros, Akuya says. Face of Ashwin looks.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I mean, the involvement of, you know, George Soros and Open Society is, you know, again, it's one of these things that George Soros is often a boogeyman of the left. I see him as just another billionaire with some, you know, I don't believe, you know, all the stuff that, for example, David Icke talks about him. I'm not you know, again, like those are far too easy solutions. Like the fact that Soros as a billionaire exists, that he made his money from that he made his billions rather from the 2008 crash, I think are far more indicative of his position in society than, like, for example, Soros has been connected to so many different things, like the migrant caravan. Does anybody remember that? The migrant caravan in America that nobody talks about? Exactly. Like, was it 2 years ago? There was like the migrant caravan, this horde of, you know, black people and Mexicans and Hondurans that were about to invade the, you know, the southern American border. It didn't even like come to, like, there was like a couple of groups of people who turned into a convoy, you know. And, you know, apparently Soros was funding that. And, like, I have no doubt that there are certain things that Soros is funding that are that actually turn out to be, like, just vanity projects. In the same way that Bill Gates, through his vast ego and vast pocket, has delivered some really awful health programs to, you know, sub-Saharan African countries. You know, but again, like, we have to look at, I want to focus on the materiality of what it is that they're doing, and the fact that it is actually wealth inequality that is the real driver for some of these problems. Like, fair enough, like this, because to be honest, the same argument was made against Extinction Rebellion, And I'm not a fan of XR anymore because of their position with the police. I'm highly anti-police, but yeah, like a lot of people saying, oh yeah, Gale was connected with 5G. I think it's absolute bollocks. And I am nervous about potential grassroots movements being products of corporate astroturfing. But like the fact is that like that's just one kind of little push. It's like saying the US election was decided by, or Brexit was decided completely by, Russians or hacking. Yeah, sure, they had a little bit of a contribution, but like there's a real like kind of anger underneath that, the white anger that you saw in the streets yesterday. Where's that coming from? That's not Russians. That's not like, Cambridge Analytica. There's something there. There's something that's poisoning those people. There's something that's making them, like every single one of them, have a freaking massive beer belly or wet themselves. Like I saw so many folks who just wet themselves. Like
what I would say though is all that stuff, although important, if I just put it to the side, I would say that since the last 2 weeks, week and a half, I've had more meaningful and interesting and helpful conversations with my white friends and family than I've ever had in my lifetime. I don't know what happened. I don't know why the video of George Floyd got people to listen. I don't know why. There was some secret formula that I don't think I'll ever understand, because it's not like this stuff doesn't happen all the time on this scale. I don't know what the magic formula was, but I've had positive things come out of it just in my own sort of circle, and I think I'm clinging on to that, because I think I've always race and racism and things. It's always been something I've always been very sad and anxious about, and it's a big part of my life and always has been, especially in the career I'm in and where I grew up and all that kind of stuff. So it's very, very much at the front of my life. And the last 2 weeks, week and a half have been the most positive from that angle I've ever felt in my life. I said that Tuesday, the Blackout Tuesday, was the first time in my 33 years I felt like people cared.
Yeah, totally.
That they actually cared. I was like, this is the first time I've ever felt like people actually care.
Same.
It's so sad, but totally. I mean, that's good, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel exactly the same. Yeah. And it's not just, I've had white friends who stuck up for me before against racists, but I've never actively seen people go, we need to learn, we actually need to educate ourselves.
I've never seen that in my life.
Clubs, I'm like, okay, great. And recognizing, like, me asking you questions is hard work. You can say no, and giving me the freedom to be like, I don't need to get involved in this discussion. I can choose, and then recognizing that it's hard work. And
to add on to that point, the conversations that are happening not just in our communities but also in our workplaces. For me, the conversation in the workplace is so important. So I work at a technology platform / creative media agency, and a month ago, like us bringing like kind of the BLM movement is part of like an all hands meeting call wouldn't have been something that anybody would have really thought about. But it's happened.
And if you brought it up, it would have been like really awkward.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it's PC gone mad.
Oh, PC gone mad.
Not only that, but so our company essentially one of its products is programmatic media. So basically the banner ads that you see on lots of different websites serving up kind of advertising. We do that for the recruitment industry, for the recruitment sector and recruitment clients. There's an organization called Stop Funding Hate, which looks so it looks to defund hateful publications, the Daily Mail, the Sun, all that kind of stuff from digital advertising and regular advertising. We have made a pledge to basically put on a block list all of the titles that Stop Funding Hate applies to. So essentially, neither us nor our clients are going to be sending revenue or supporting any of these ones. And that is, it's such a small thing to do. Such a small thing to do, but
it's amazing. Imagine the ripple effect of that.
Like, even though you've got like these big corporations like Disney who are saying, "Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter," yet are taking John Boyega out of their Chinese, Star Wars release poster. Like people calling, hypocrisy out for that, saying Starbucks, saying, "Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter," but doesn't matter enough to allow us to have our workers wear a BLM badge. Little things. There's like little things like that, where people are realizing now, oh yeah, corporations are actually horrifically hypocritical beings. They're the ones who'll say anything to get any money. Not anyways.
Yeah, I mean, going back to linking the work and the spiritual bypassing a little bit here, I think I mentioned it earlier how I was approached by a yoga studio here in Brighton who'd acknowledged that there was no BAME teachers or students going there, and I told them, "You're asking me to do some work for you here, aren't you? You want me to tell you what to do?" And they were like, yeah. And I was like, "You're gonna have to pay me." And they're like, "Fine." So I emailed them. I got advice first because I'm not a consultant on this issue, but I have a lot of experience. So I thought I'd ask what was a reasonable price. So I emailed them and I got an email back that they couldn't afford it. But we would like to give you a teaching job. I mean, I'm not looking for extra teaching jobs, thanks, but we'd like to give you a position. And I was like, I don't need a teaching job, but the fact that you can't pay anyone, it was £200 for a day to get more. Anyway, so I just, and then she ended it by saying, "We're not giving you the position though, just because you're brown. We're giving it because you're a good teacher."
Why did you want to bloody hire me before?
I was just like, well, okay. What makes you a good teacher?
I'm sorry.
Would you not give an Indian person a yoga teaching job based on the fact that they're Indian and they've studied all their life, or the fact that you don't think they're a good teacher?
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking? Yeah, anyway. It was strange, very strange. I've just left it now. I've just left it. Thanks. Yeah.
Look after your own inner peace. And
yeah.
Boundaries.
I don't know where to go with that, but
something positive. So I work in a trust like I said, in Southeast London. Most of our patients are Black. Most of our staff are Black. But obviously all the managers are white, obviously. Got a meeting on Wednesday with the chair, and one of the junior doctors is actually really passionate about Black Lives Matter, and she's basically getting them to admit to the trust, getting them to admit that they are institutionally racist, and what are they going to do about it. And he's very receptive to this, and he's going to do an announcement and basically openly admit that the trust is racist and have a plan going forward. I think that's bloody great.
This is incredible. This is incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, whatever sort of ins and outs and all the bad stuff and the funding and whatever that is, I'm taking all these things, I'm holding them in a special place because I don't think it would have happened without it.
Yeah.
Totally.
In the cannabis scene as well, like there is like people are coming together, and actually like the cannabis scene in the UK, the cannabis business scene is very white, and there's a large enough kind of section of it that is actually racist. There's a chap from Canada, a guy called Mark Emery, who's very famous for founding a company called Cannabis Culture. It was a wider dispensary. And for the last year, for whatever reason, I've just kept following him because at one point I respected him for being like, somebody who was fighting against prohibition. But again, he is possibly one of the most transphobic, misogynistic, kind of racist people out there. And he is somebody that a lot of people in the cannabis industry look up to. And when was it? In fact, before, like a little bit before, like everything kind of kicked off, I'd posted like on our Instagram channel, like he's a bit of a racist. He's also got very questionable relationships with underage girls, all that, the usual kind of stuff.
Oh,
and like off the back of that, there's so many people that started galvanizing around it. And then one of the UK's biggest kind of cannabis businesses then stuck its neck out and published what I saw as a really good, important, intelligent, reasoned blog about how the cannabis industry needs to dump its racism, of looking at the history of race of prohibition, and looking at how we can make it more inclusive. And there was another guy, Jason Reed from LEAP UK, Law Enforcement Action Program, who wrote a fantastic kind of treatise on more black access into the cannabis scene. And these articles are getting viewed, they're getting rewritten. These conversations,
there's a bit of movement.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So it's just like, to sum up, because Akuya was saying the work needs to happen inside. Yes, it does, but in order to initialize it, sometimes there needs to be work outside and some screening and some whatever needs to be done, some violence sometimes even, whatever it needs to happen to bring understanding. We have about 12 minutes, so I just want to be starting to wrap things up slowly. And I really love this discussion, guys. I think it's so important to have those discussions, and this hopefully will educate people more. So as a white ally, there's many people who want to be allies, but they might not know how. They might do things wrong just out of ignorance, but they have really good intentions and they're trying to educate themselves. But while this is happening, I want to help spread the education. What, in your opinion, is a good thing to do for white allies to help, and what is not a helpful practice?
I can go. Stop the awkward silence. So finally, I'm just going to say, so I, obviously when all this started happening, I started posting a lot, and I got a lot of messages from white people who I may have not spoken to about 10 years, asking me for advice, and it was quite overwhelming. And I realized later that it was because I'm probably the only black person that they know. So I got basically racially dumped on, which is fine. I know it's all coming from a good place. So what I did, I made a post and just directed people to a post because it was getting quite exhausting. What it is, these people who have now been awakened and their eyes have been opened to the racism that is just inherent in their world, and they've got this energy, and you need to channel it properly. What I've said is you need to educate yourself first and foremost, because without the education, you're not going to use your energy properly. It's not up to black people to do this for you. That is not our job. We've got enough to deal with without having to individually educate all of you. You're all, you've all got the ability to do that. There is the internet, you have a phone, you're an intelligent being. You shouldn't be relying on black people to tell you what to do. Obviously, we can guide you, and I really appreciated it, but it's not my job. There's a few books which I always tell people to read. There's one book called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. The other one is called Me and White Supremacy. I can put them on the chat after.
Yeah. The one of them's an actual course as well, isn't it? Is it the
so Me and White Supremacy is like almost like a workbook.
You have to do the
You have to actually do the work.
I just read it.
Yeah, that's the Me and White Supremacy book, and then Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.
Yeah,
educate yourself. I think why it's so awkward and more people, they don't know what to do is because, like you said, Anya, people are scared of doing the wrong thing, and I think sometimes that means they don't do anything, and that to me is worse. I think a lot of these problems are born out of the silent majority. You don't want a silent majority anymore. If you're angry about something, you say something. If it's all about speaking up and saying how you feel. We're all doing this together. We're all growing. So if you make a mistake, or maybe you accidentally offend someone, and you apologize and just say, we're all still growing. We're all still learning. No one's going to hold you accountable. But if you don't do anything, then you're part of the problem. I want to get this fear away from, especially white people, worried that they're going to offend someone, and that leads them to not doing anything at all. I had a friend who messaged me. She's a high school teacher, and she's like, I just realized, all there's no black people in my school. You know, what should I do? What should I do? I don't want to. And I was like, well, first of all, you just got to have the difficult conversations. You're going to have them. You've got to push through the awkwardness. And these will be with maybe your spouse, your close family, colleagues, your friends, yourself. You know, that's all we're asking for, is to be uncomfortable for a bit. Think about, you know, the black experience and what that's like. Asking you to be uncomfortable for a bit is not a lot to ask. I think I'm really appreciative of all this. I know I'm saying, oh, I'm getting it all and it's exhausting, but I'm very happy and very pleased that people are actually reaching out to me and doing that. Like I said, I honestly didn't think people cared until 2 weeks ago. I'm 33 years old. I have got lots of white friends. My mum's white. I grew up in a white area. I literally did not think they cared. Until 2 weeks ago, when people were individually messaging me things. My friend sent me some sweets in the post. She didn't know what to do because she felt bad, and she was just like, "Oh, I think it's sweets." So I got some white guilt sweets. But you know, I'm not getting mad at that. Like, she's doing it because she wants to show me that she loves me. She doesn't know what else to do. So although it's like quite funny and a bit odd, it's really appreciated. I think the worst thing you can do, if you're asking what we should do, is do nothing. That is the worst thing you can do. I think anything else is fair game. Do whatever you need to do. And if we're all growing, if maybe you do something that's a bit off, well, you'll learn from it. But no one's going to be mad at you. We've been waiting for you to speak for hundreds of years. So just keep doing it. That's all I would say.
Yeah, totally.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think definitely when it comes to the close knit and the close people close to me, I'm seeing something great happening. Aqua has just mentioned something on the thread there, which something that's been strongly on my mind as well, is about the trade with other African countries and the NGOs that just run things there, who just given all this money, and none of it is empowering local people. And that's kind of like, how do we change that as well? How do we actually change racism in African countries? Like, it's one story here, but actually, what about there? You know, they're amongst their own people there, but they're still affected by white supremacy. And so, yeah, I'm starting to do some research and how to look into that. If anybody's got any links or any people I can speak to about that, I'd really welcome that.
Thank you. Yes, go, Asher.
So, yeah, I think I would say, like, for anyone, because there's going to be tons of people out there who are like me and who only read economic or social theory and Marxist philosophy through comic books. or scrolling on the Twitter. No, but there are those kind of out there who, you know, we can give them reading tools, but you know, they'll never get around to reading the book, and they'll never get around to thinking about it. There's two things that I still have to practice so hard. One of them's deep listening, and the other one's just breathing. Yeah. And especially, like, I can imagine as a white person who's learning all of this, you know, learning about all this stuff, like, you know, especially with my girlfriend who, you know, she's Polish, she's, you know, Polish Italian.
Big up Evelina. Just
yeah. Yeah, she's listening in the other room. But like, it can be overwhelming when you suddenly open the book of colonialism and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
What did we do? And like, you're just like, when you open, like, you know, in breathwork, there's that point where you like have that explosion and you just start crying and crying. Like, that is something that can happen. Like, you take on like so much, almost like the weight of history on your shoulders, and it can traumatize you in a small way. So there's where the breathing works. And it's like it's also allowing yourself to breathe and take what you've heard and take that message. And it's something that I so wish Camille Barton was here. She starts her talks with "Let's breathe together" and "Let's finish breathing together." I'm wondering if we can do that now.
Maya, can you lead us for breathing? Since we have a wellness yoga expert here, we should do it.
Totally. I can definitely do that with us for sure.
We have 3 minutes now, so I just want to say we're going to wrap up because we have another panel coming before we do the breathing. And it was really great conversation, I think. Thank you all. But yeah, let's have some breathing together.
Ooh,
So wherever you are, hopefully you're sat somewhere, find yourself in a nice, comfortable position. I like to have a little wiggle around, get my sit bones nicely grounded. And I want you to lengthen up through the spine, up through the top of your head. Close your eyes. Allow the muscles in your face to relax. And we're going to take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And I want you to let out a little sigh out through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. So keep doing this, inhaling through the nose, out through the mouth, and just noticing any relaxation that you get from when you exhale out through your mouth. That might be around the shoulders, in the face. And if you're lucky enough to be on your own and you haven't got a camera and the microphone, you can let out that sigh as loud as you like. Let it all out. Let it out. And just check where that inhale is going. Is it going into the belly? Where is it going? You want it to go deep down into the belly. So quite often that inhale just stays up in our chest. So feel that belly expanding. And the reason why I've chosen to breathe out through the mouth is it's cooling. So if you're feeling a little bit hot and bothered, it's a really good way to cool down is to breathe out through the mouth. Deep breath in. It's that pranic energy. Let all that life force in. We all breathe. We all are connected with that same pranic energy. Now I'd like you to breathe just in and out through the nose now. Just in and out through the nose, which is a little bit more relaxing. Still feeling that expansion in the ribs and the belly. See if you can do this and stay a little bit still. Stillness of the body. See if we can bring a little bit of stillness into the mind. I'm going to ask you to bring your palms together. You're going to bring your palms together, and as you do that, think of something that you're grateful for. With your gratitude hand position. Just thinking of something that you're grateful for. And then rubbing your palms together, securing in that gratitude, feeling that heat. And then just resting with your eyes. Taking in the heat, taking in that gratitude, and then you can open your eyes.
That was a great ending to this.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to now say, Natalie, stay with me for the next panel. We're going to talk about mental health and psychedelics. I'm going to say bye to Mela and Ashwin. Thanks so much, guys. We literally, I love you both so much.
Guys,
Love you.
nice to meet you guys.
Champignons, by the way.
Very, very nice. Okay, Ashwin face, bye-bye.
Bye.
And Bella, bye.